To have a photobiomodulation effect, we put light into the tissue, and two things that are important: the light has to penetrate, so that's the wavelength, the depth of the beam, and it also has to be absorbed into a structure. So a shallow end of the light spectrum, we have a very high energy but short penetration, and most of the absorption is into the melanin and the hemoglobin chromophores. As we go deeper, we have red and infrared light. Now the red light will penetrate into your 800 nanometer range, and here we have a Goldilocks point at 810, where the penetration at 810 has maximum absorption in the cytochrome C oxidase chromophore that sits in the membrane of the mitochondria. And as we go deeper, the longer wavelengths start to penetrate into deeper tissues, but the main chromophore is water. Now, with each of those chromophores, we have a change in the activation of the cell membrane. We get nitric oxide, ATP produced, that gives us our energy. We have reactive oxygen species, and this causes a cascade of cellular actions. And then we go on to gene transcription, and with all of those cellular activations, we can have a reduction in inflammation, tissue healing, and activation at a cell level for other biomodulated activities. So in a nutshell, we have light, it hits the mitochondria, changes the nucleus, and then we get the cellular outcomes, the growth factor. So we have cell healing, analgesia, anti-inflammatory, and pain relief. Now, each of those actions happens at via a different chromophore. So we can see on this graph, we've got absorption coefficient mapped against the wavelength. Now, on the left-hand side of the wave, you can see that the high absorption in the wavelengths below 600, we have a high absorption into melanin, hemoglobin, and into oxyhemoglobin. So the shallow tissues are highly absorbed into those three main chromophores. As we go into the mid 700 to 800s, melanin drops off as an absorption coefficient, and we have an increase in the mitochondria cytochrome C membrane at 810, which is the Goldilocks point. We still don't have a lot of absorption in water until we get into the high 800s and 900s. And you can see that water absorption as its chromophore is very high in the 900s. Now, if we look at this graph, we can see that there is an optical therapeutic window, and that sits between 600 and probably around about 1200 to 1300 nanometers if we look closely at the graph. So if we want to target melanin, we use shallower wavelengths. If we want to target cytochrome C, we use around the 800s. And if we want to target water as our main chromophore, then we look at the deeper wavelengths above 900. Now, each of those will give a similar outcome. We get a modulation of the cell. So we have nitric oxide, we have a change in the ROS. So we can get analgesia through a reduction in inflammation and an increase in cell tissue healing. So we have reduced healing times with all of these activities. Now, reduced healing times, we can combine that with active physiotherapy, which is my role. So we load fibers. We know with the light going through, we have reduced inflammation, we have increased cellular growth, so we can build tissue repair much quicker and more efficiently. We also know that light photobiomodulation has no side effects and is non-invasive. Now, this pad I have designed for horses. It's got a 660, an 810 and a 980 wavelength. So the 660 is good for any superficial skin conditions or wounds, The 810 and the 980 is the Goldilocks point for cytochrome C and water absorption. So we know then that the wave is getting in deeper for a much better effect.